Hey guys, Hailey, Lain, aka Key Black here, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff. And today, I want to talk to you about Freakazoid, which is a total change in tone from the previous one, but I just sat down to watch the entirety of the Freakazoid series for the very first time just a couple weeks ago, which, you know, believe it or not, it was one of those shows that I knew about growing up, but I never actually watched an episode. That meme with Candleman, I won't say his name, back in the security breach thing, Jess had to explain that joke to me. I had never seen the episode. I actually didn't know what it was referencing. So I don't know what, set me off recently. Somebody probably mentioned it in conversation, and I'm like that, if somebody mentions something, I'll be like immediately, I have to go learn everything about this thing. And rather than scrolling through the Wikipedia like my usual Redditor senses want me to do, I decided to actually sit down and watch the show from start to finish to be like, okay, if I want to understand it, I've got to actually experience it. I don't need to tell you guys how freaking funny Freakazoid is. What I found amazing about it is I've never really been a fan of the kind of humor that relies too much on pop culture. Like, in certain cases, it's really well done, but you have to understand the reference to pop culture to get the joke, and if you don't, then it usually falls flat, right? But I only understood about half of the jokes in Freakazoid that were referencing pop culture, and yet it was still funny even when I didn't get them. Like, case in point was the final episode. They brought on that carpenter guy. I don't know his name. I've never even heard of him before. I had to go look him up to see who the heck they were referencing, but I didn't need to while watching the episode because what I got from it is like, oh, this is the Bob Ross of carpentry. Okay, and that was basically all that you needed to understand the jokes in the episode, and then if you actually understood who he was, the jokes became funnier. And that's like, I was sitting there just in awe of that's so simple, but it's so well done. And because not all of the humor is like that, not all of it depended on a pop culture reference here and there, it was just a funny show. It was a fun time internally, self-contained. It was hilarious. And I was just sitting there going wow, not only half these jokes are probably cancelable nowadays, but you just don't see this kind of humor on modern cartoons. So there was that side of it, but the other side is I'm an animator. The first thing I notice about a cartoon is how well it's animated. And the other thing about comparing Freakazoid to the kind of cartoons that you'd produce modern day, right? And I'm guilty of this too, is if somebody were to pitch a cartoon that was primarily gag oriented or primarily pop culture reference oriented, something like that, a conversation that you'd usually hear would probably be something like, okay, well, we don't need to break the bank on this one. All we need is to have enough animation quality and strong enough poses to sell the joke, and that's pretty much it. We don't need to go too hard into the paint and animation quality. That was not the case for Freakazoid, and I remember sitting there slack-jawed just at the opening and at the fact that the opening animation quality was the same as the animation quality throughout the cartoon. It was absolutely fantastic for a couple of reasons, right? I love doing this when I'm watching older cartoons. Batman the Animated Series is like this. Inspector Gadget is like this. They're animated by Japanese studios where the boards and everything are made in the West, but they're shipped over to Japan or Korea in some cases, I guess, to actually be animated. And I remember just realizing, wait a second. Not only is the animation quality fantastic, not only is the drawing quality generally really good, with only a couple of cases where it's okay, here's the B-list team, but there are cases in certain jokes where the line delivery and the specific word in the particular sentence of that joke is what sells the joke. And they would have these very specific emotions and specific subtleties of expression and acting to sell those jokes. And I'm just hang on a second. These are English jokes written by primary language English speakers, animated and executed by Japanese and Korean speakers. That is incredible that the joke carried through so well from concept to execution. They even had a joke at one point about whoa guys, watch the lip flaps when and I was losing my mind at that joke because all the episodes prior to that I'd kind of noticed okay, well they're not really, they're getting the expressions right and they're getting the general actions right, but the lip flaps are kind of off, and that makes sense because, not English speakers, no worries. But then they brought that in as a joke for one of the episodes, and from that point on, the quality of the lip sync jumped up tenfold, and I was that is brilliant. It's such a self-referential kind of thing. It's half these jokes I feel like people would get just from pop culture, half of them I feel like people would just get from it being inherently funny, but then there's the other level of like, you only get this kind of joke if you work in the industry. So I was dying watching Freakazoid. I was so sad when it finally ended and there was no more episodes. I was like, maybe it'll be funny if I find the Freakazoid clips from Teen Titans Go. Oh no, it's not the same. I don't know what I expected. But God, it really is a case of they don't make them like they used to. Like, not to sound like a cynical old man, right? But really, there is so much heart put into this cartoon. I could just tell while watching it, and I was just like getting inspired watching it. So this is actually the very first time I've ever drawn Freakazoid. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed me gushing about having watched the cartoon that I missed out on for the very first time, and I will see you in the next Off the Cuff. Thanks again.